The other part of this, slicing the bologna. And this is what Anton Abode with Labor Relations. He's come in a couple of times and he's taught here in the state. I was able to attend one of the classes. But basically his idea is, look, you have to, as an interviewer, you have to be very disciplined. You're going to take the scene or the incident a piece at a time, small segment, and you're going to work through them, and you're going to ask open-ended questions. What were you doing? Who were you with? Who else did you see at the time? Who did you see? Or yeah, who did you see at that time? What did you see? What did you hear? Now, off of those questions, you might have some other follow-up questions that are open-ended. Person says, well, at 10 o'clock I saw this. How did you know it was at 10 o'clock? Well, I had an appointment. I had to leave for an appointment at 10:15, so I was watching the clock. And that's why I had just looked at the clock when I knew this happened. All right, well, that makes sense. So you can go through there. Well, I heard a couple people talking. Who were they? What did their voices sound like? You know, but you're going through this segment a little bit at a time. And then the other thing is, you don't jump segments. Make sure you thoroughly cover each section as you go. And then, if you have questions, you can go back at the very end. But during that process, don't be jumping around, because what are you doing to that person's memory? You're confusing them, and they're having a hard time staying with you. So you want to start at the beginning and go to the end. Once you've done that, you want to develop that sequence of events, if you will. Okay? That sequence of events is going to help you kind of put things in perspective, because you're going to start with a timeline and follow it through. Now, you don't have to put it in the timeline, you know, like you see in the newspaper or the magazines or whatever. You can put it that way, or you can put it one through whatever, but you document when things happen. It does. It really does help you understand kind of when things happened and how it happened, kind of more or less. So I started off, this is for that fatality that we talked about earlier that I sketched out. The warehouse has two main aisles, one that runs north and south, one that runs east and west. Worker A and B were working a 12-hour shift. They started at 8 o'clock in the morning. Is that important? Why? Fatigue. Possibly, right? Worker A was 6'1" tall. Does that play into this maybe? Could, yeah, absolutely, right? Okay. So at approximately 6:40, Worker A was conducting inventory of the lumber in the warehouse. So we know he was doing something as he was walking through there. Worker A was walking towards the west end of the warehouse on the south side of the west aisle. Well, that makes sense. Okay, so now we know the direction he's going, where he's at. Worker B was moving 2 stacks of 2x6 by 8-foot lumber on pallets, forklift from the final staging area in the planer facility to the warehouse. The forklift was traveling with the load in the front. Does that bring any questions? Yeah, could he see? And normally when you have a load on a forklift, is forward's the way you're normally going. Each pallet was 8 feet long, 3 feet tall, and 4 feet wide, so you had 2 of those stacked on top of one another. You were 1 foot 4 inches off the floor, and the top of the load from the floor to the top was 7'4". The height of the individual kind of come into play. The line of sight of Worker B while operating the forklift was 7 foot. The forklift was traveling approximately 5 miles an hour. Now, while I didn't have any videotape of that, but the witnesses had told me, well, he wasn't speeding. He was going about the normal rate of speed, which was about 5 miles an hour. Approximately at 6:45 p.m., Worker A started across the north aisle. At the same time, Worker B entered into the west aisle. They collided. The impact, that's what killed Worker A. Do you see some things that you would like some further information on? Or some of these contributing factors that you lined out in here that would say, you know, these are things I'd really like to discuss a little bit more in depth. And that's what we're talking about, is that sequence of events does give that to you, as far as you can look at certain things and say, why? We want you to identify those root causes of the incident. And so what does that look like? We're looking at the basic causes. So I actually got this, I was looking for a definition, and this is what I came up with the Root Cause Analysis Handbook by EQE International. And basically this is what they said. It's basic causes. So it's root causes, reasonably be identified, management has control over them, and more importantly, you can have some kind of a recommendation in handling this situation. So there's those 4 things that make a root cause. So we're going to work with an incident weed, because we don't like weeds, right? We want to get rid of weeds. When we look at a weed, what do we see most of the time when we notice that there's a weed in the yard? The flower, right? It's blooming. But actually, if we're to look at this as an incident, that bloom, this is what happened. This is the transfer, the potential transfer of hazardous energy. In other words, that's what was the final cause. That was the impact, if you will. the two people colliding in that one aisle came together for this, okay? Now, what led to the direct cause was contributing causes. And these are the conditions that we have at the time. The interaction between the hazardous conditions and the unsafe behavior is what led to that becoming an incident. What is a root cause then? Because when you look at it, it's just like that weed. These things are easily identified. You guys already did it this morning. When we talked about, it's the employee's inattentiveness. That's a contributing cause. They weren't focused. Do you think that guy walking through doing the inventory maybe had something to do with this? Where he wasn't paying attention? Wasn't focused in on the hazards at the time? Certainly. But is that the cause, or is that a contributing cause? That's not the root cause. Those things are buried. Those are the things we have to dig and work for a little bit more. And that's the root causes. Those are the deficiency in the situation. So it depends on what we found, how it was set up, what in our deficiencies or what in our system allowed those contributing causes to exist in the first place. That's what we want to understand. Does everyone kind of understand the root causes then? What we're looking for, how we're looking for that? Keep in mind too that when we look at an incident, we have an incident that happens, the two easiest things to identify is the equipment, right? Whether they had proper guarding or whether they didn't, what was it about the equipment they were working with? And obviously the employee's actions come into play into this. And that's real easy to focus in on. Now the things that we have a little bit harder time at trying to investigate a little bit more is those environmental factors. How did the environment play into this? And also those management factors, because the management factors play into this too. That expectation that sometimes, we think we make an innocent comment, and you're talking to that guy that's driving on the road and it's all icy and stuff. You may have just had a discussion, and it may have been one of those things where you said, we really need to get to these meetings, and we need to get there on time, and it's important that we do that. You may have said it just that simply, and that person took it as, man, I have to be there. The boss expects me to be there. He made it clear to me that we need to be there at these meetings. So you have to understand that there are management and organizational factors and those environmental factors in this process that we also need to identify. So this is part of this process that we need to focus in on. We also need to understand the theories behind this. The one thing they told us was that there is one thing that you need to identify, and you just need to find it, and if you take that one thing away, this won't be an accident. That would disrupt the sequence, and it wouldn't have turned into an accident. So then as safety people, that's what we're trying to identify is that single event, that one thing. Well, then they kind of morphed into that domino effect, if you will. So lining those dominoes up, and if you push one, then it knocks all the rest down, right? That's your accident sequence. So they said, okay, so which dominoes, assigning meaning to which, to those different events, which one of those events, again, can you pull out that would prevent this from happening again? The problem with looking at the single event is that if you only remove one thing, chances are you're not going to prevent this from happening, because that may have been insequential to the whole process. Maybe it's something else that was, and that would have stopped at this time, but a lot of times it's going a different route. So it may not be the true cause of the situation. So what we really want to look at is that multiple cause. We want to ask, what events are root causes? So there's more than one that can happen with each incident sequence. All right? That's what we want to focus in on, is those multiple causes.